Imagine calling 911 in a life or death emergency, hoping for help to arrive fast only to have the people who should be saving you stopped at your front door. This is exactly what happened to me in a neighborhood governed by a homeowners association, or HOA, where strict rules sometimes feel like they come before human lives. What started as a routine medical emergency quickly spiraled into a nightmare I never saw coming. The paramedics were literally barred from entering my home because of the HOA's rigid policies. It felt like time was slipping away, and every second counted. This story isn't just about a medical emergency. It's about the clash between safety, authority, and unexpected consequences. The HOA's attempt to enforce rules in the name of community control led to devastating results, so serious that it ended up with someone facing a manslaughter charge. Who could have imagined that something so cold and bureaucratic would have such a tragic human cost? And who is really responsible when rules get in the way of saving a life? In this video, I'll take you through the tense moments when help was refused at the doorstep, the growing panic inside the house, and the shocking aftermath that no one expected. We'll meet the key players, the paramedics caught in the middle, the HOA representatives enforcing their policies, and the family desperately trying to fight for survival. This isn't just a story about one home or one emergency. It's about what can happen when rules clash with real life. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a simple call for help turned into a heartbreaking legal battle, raising tough questions about responsibility, authority, and the true cost of strict community rules. But for now, the story is far from over. What happened next will leave you shocked. Stay with me to uncover the full story behind how an HOA's decision led to consequences no one could have predicted. The day everything changed started like any other. I was at home, going about my usual routine, when suddenly I felt something was very wrong. My heart was racing, and I knew I needed help fast. My family called 911, hoping the paramedics would arrive in time. But what none of us expected was the obstacle waiting outside our own homeowners association. The HOA, known for enforcing strict rules about visitors and access to properties, had recently put new security measures in place. These rules weren't just inconvenient, they became deadly. When the paramedics arrived, they were stopped at the gate by HOA security personnel. They explained they couldn't enter without prior approval, which they didn't have in this emergency situation. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie, but this was happening in real life. My family was inside, terrified and helpless, watching precious minutes tick away while the people trained to save lives were forced to wait outside. The tension inside the house grew unbearable. My loved one's condition worsened, and every second felt like an eternity. The HOA security stood firm, insisting on following protocol, even as cries for help filled the air. It was a moment where policy clashed painfully with compassion. But this story isn't just about that fateful day. It's also about how the HOA's insistence on rules led to a tragedy nobody anticipated. The conflict between community governance and emergency response raises serious questions. How far should rules go? Who holds the real responsibility when things go wrong? And why did an emergency end with manslaughter charges hanging over someone's head? As the investigation unfolded, more details came to light, revealing unexpected twists about the HOA's role and the decisions made that day. The deeper I dug, the more complicated the story became. What started as a call for help turned into a legal nightmare, one that challenges how communities balance order and humanity. The full truth is still unfolding, and it's far from simple. Stay tuned, because the next part will reveal just how tangled this situation really is. As the days passed after that devastating incident, the tension in our community only grew. On one side, the HOA board members stood by their policies, insisting that security rules were necessary to protect residents and maintain order. They argued that emergency responders should have followed the proper channels before entering, pointing to the strict access procedures that were put in place after several prior security concerns. But on the other side were families like mine, left questioning how a policy meant to protect could become a barrier to life-saving care. The paramedics involved faced intense scrutiny too. They had trained for years to act quickly in emergencies, but that day their hands were tied at the gate. Their frustration and helplessness became part of the larger conflict, highlighting a painful disconnect between medical urgency and administrative control. Some neighbors sympathized with them, while others blamed them for not pushing harder to gain access. Meanwhile, inside our home, the emotional toll was unbearable. Friends and family wrestled with grief and anger, torn between wanting answers and fearing the legal consequences that were now unfolding. The news spread fast. What should have been a private tragedy became a public spectacle. The local media picked up on the story, amplifying the debates about HOA policies, emergency services, and responsibility. Legal teams entered the scene, representing both sides. The manslaughter charge added a layer of complexity and fear. Would be held accountable. Was it the HOA for enforcing rules that delayed help? The paramedics for not finding a way through? Or was it simply a tragic accident spiraling out of control? The courtroom drama loomed ahead, but before that, there were community meetings. Heated discussions and an atmosphere thick with tension and unanswered questions. Every conversation seemed to circle back to one crucial point. How could a community system designed to protect residents end up putting them in harm's way? As the conflict deepened, it became clear this story was about more than one house or one incident. It was about the fragile balance between rules and humanity. The full impact was still unfolding, and no one knew how it would all end. As the investigation dragged on, every detail seemed to uncover more questions than answers. The community was divided like never before. Neighbors, who once exchanged friendly hellos, now whispered behind closed doors, unsure whom to trust. The HOA board held their ground, doubling down on their policies, while families like mine felt betrayed and powerless. The paramedics involved gave statements describing their desperate attempts to get through, recounting every agonizing moment. They were kept out. Their voices carried frustration and heartbreak, but also a lingering sense of helplessness. Pressure mounted from all sides. The media spotlight brought public attention, sparking heated debates about the role of HOAs in emergency situations. Experts weighed in, discussing how rigid rules can clash with urgent medical needs. But those words did little to soothe the raw pain felt by my family. Every day, we relived the worst moments, counting the seconds lost, the doors closed, the lives hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, the manslaughter charge cast a heavy shadow. Who would be held responsible? Was it a tragic consequence of following protocol, or was there negligence somewhere along the way? The uncertainty gnawed at everyone involved. Legal battles loomed, threatening to drag out the pain and confusion. Even longer, the community meetings grew more intense, with voices rising and emotions spilling over. People demanded answers, accountability, and change, but no one seemed to have the right solution. The line between right and wrong blurred, and the stakes couldn't feel higher. Inside my own home, the silence was almost unbearable. We waiting, for justice, for clarity, for some kind of closure that still felt out of reach. And then, just when it seemed like the story couldn't get any more complicated, new information came to light, details that threatened to turn everything upside down. What happened next would change everything, shaking the foundation of this entire tragedy. The truth was closer than ever, but so was the moment when it would all come crashing down. The tension was unbearable, and the answers everyone desperately sought were just beyond reach. Just when we thought the worst was behind us, another shocking twist turned the whole situation on its head. new evidence surfaced, suggesting that the HOA's security policies weren't just strict, they may have been deliberately designed in a way that delayed emergency access. It wasn't just a case of following rules gone wrong. There were whispers of mismanagement and a possible cover-up. Suddenly, the question wasn't only about the tragic consequences, but about whether those in charge knew the risks and ignored them anyway. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors who had defended the HOA started to question their loyalty. Investigators dug deeper, uncovering emails and internal communications that hinted at warnings being ignored and concerns being dismissed before the tragedy even happened. This new layer of complexity made it clear that this wasn't just a simple accident or unfortunate event, it was part of a much bigger conflict involving power, responsibility, and trust. Meanwhile, the legal battle intensified. The manslaughter charge took on a new meaning as lawyers debated whether the HOA board members themselves should face charges. The stakes were higher than ever, not just for the paramedics and my family, but for everyone living in the community. The story that started as a desperate plea for help had evolved into a fight against a system that seemed to put rules above lives. Tensions boiled over during one particularly heated. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension as the manslaughter trial finally began. Every detail from that day was laid bare: the frantic 911 call, the paramedics held at the gate, the unyielding HOA security, and the devastating outcome. Witnesses testified, emotions ran high, and the community watched, desperate for justice and answers. It was clear the tragedy wasn't just about one failure, but a series of decisions that collided in the worst possible way. Then, just when it seemed the blame would fall squarely on the HOA board or the paramedics, the defense dropped a bombshell. Security footage from a nearby camera surfaced, revealing that the gate was actually left unlocked during the emergency. The paramedics, it seemed, had taken a wrong turn and arrived at the wrong entrance, a fact that no one had realized before. This new evidence shifted the entire perspective. While the HOA policies were strict, they weren't the direct cause of the delay. The room went silent. Families who had believed the HOA was solely responsible now faced a more complicated truth. The real tragedy was a combination of miscommunication, human error, and unfortunate timing. No one was completely innocent, and no one entirely to blame. The manslaughter charge was dropped, but the scars remained. In the aftermath, the HOA agreed to overhaul its security protocols, working with emergency services to ensure no such barriers would ever block help again. The paramedics received new training on navigating complex community layouts, and neighbors began to rebuild trust, though the memory of that day lingered. But just as the community thought it could start to heal, a final twist emerged. An anonymous letter arrived, suggesting that someone had intentionally misdirected the paramedics that day. Who would do such a thing, and why? The question hung in the air, a chilling reminder that beneath the surface of any community, secrets can still hide, waiting to be uncovered. The story wasn't quite over after all. The discovery of that anonymous letter brought back a wave of uncertainty, but it also sparked a renewed commitment among neighbors to come together and face the challenges honestly. Investigations followed, and while no one was ever formally charged with intentionally misdirecting the paramedics, the incident revealed deeper issues within the community: issues of mistrust, poor communication, and the dangers of letting strict rules get in the way of common sense and compassion. Over time, the HOA and the residents worked hand in hand to change how emergencies would be handled in the future. New systems were put in place, better signage, open communication lines with emergency services, and more flexible security policies that prioritized safety over bureaucracy. Paramedics were trained to navigate the neighborhood's layout more effectively, and the community organized regular meetings to discuss concerns openly, hoping to prevent anything like this from happening again. For my family, the healing process was long and painful, but sharing our story helped turn pain into purpose. We became advocates for change, reminding others that rules and policies should never come before human lives. The tragedy that unfolded in our home became a powerful example of why empathy and flexibility matter, especially in emergencies. This experience taught us all a vital lesson. Communities thrive when people listen to each other, when rules serve the people, not the other way around. While the manslaughter charge was dropped and no single person was blamed for the tragedy, the impact stayed with everyone involved. It was a harsh reminder that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from outside forces, but from within systems that forget the human side of things. Thank you for listening to this story. If you or someone you know lives in an HOA, it's important to understand how policies affect safety and to speak up when rules don't make sense. Lives depend on it.